Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. Today's card uses several of the new Stampin' Up! Products. I'm also using these dies from Simon Says Stamp. I'm making my own sentiment with the labeler alphabet, and I'm using my new favorite products, the Foxy Friends stamp set and the matching Fox Builder punch. So I'm going to start by punching out all of the pieces I need. This is Pumpkin Pie cardstock. This is Nina Solar White cardstock. This is Basic Gray cardstock by Stampin' Up! And then I need a little black nose, and then I also need an extra one of these face things in white. So these are all the pieces that I have cut out. One is the raccoon and the other is the fox. I had to punch twice for that ear triangle because there's only one in the punch for some reason. Anyway, I wanted his belly to be white, so that's why I punched another one of those face pieces. And I'm just going to round out one side, and then I'll use that on his chest to have a little white fluffy chest. You're really going to need this pick-me-up stick. It comes in handy and it makes putting these things together so much easier. I usually use a 2A glue pen, but on the night that Stampin' Up! Retired their glue pen, I left mine with the top off all night and it completely dried it out. So I'm going to get one of those zig ones as soon as I have a chance. But anyway, so I'm going to put all these pieces on. So what I'm doing here is I put a tiny little dot of this Tombow Mono multi-glue because it is very sticky and you don't really need very much. So with a pick-me-up stick, it's got a sticky side and then a plastic piece on the other side that you can use to kind of arrange your pieces before they have a chance to dry. So here's the little black nose, and I'm putting it right at the point where that bottom V is. And a little dot on the edge of the tail, and there's a little piece for that. And then finally, I'm going to put his belly on. So just draw a line there and stick it right there. It's okay if it's sticking over the top because I have his head to put right there. A little bit more glue, and with these you can tilt their heads any way you want. So that's kind of cute about it. And then for the tail, just put a little bit on the bottom and then press it down. I'm going to set that off to the side and work on my raccoon, which needs to be stamped. And you can see there is a raccoon face and a raccoon tail. So I'm going to pull both of those stamps out of the set, and I'm going to ink it up with some VersaFine Black Onyx ink. And this is pretty easy to line up. The tail, however, was a little bit more difficult, and I decided I needed to pull out my Stamp-A-Majig to get that lined up right. So I'm going to ink this up, stamp my sheet. And because my tail is this little thing, I'm going to secure it onto my craft mat with a piece of surgical tape since I don't really care too much about the bottom. So I'm going to get that lined up, and then I know exactly where I'm stamping with the Stamp-A-Majig. And it really didn't take that much extra time to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to work on the eyes and the nose. It's this piece right here because there's 3 different eyes in the set. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to ink it up with some black ink, and this is just to get my nose because the eyes aren't going to be showing up because it's the same color ink that I just used on his face. So I'm going to make the eyes white, so I'll just ink up the eyes again. So I cleaned off my stamp and inked it up with some white and stamped it down. So I think that looks cute with the white. And then I just put a little glue, put his head on. He's going to go straight up because he's going to be leaning in from the side, so I don't need his head tilted. And I'm going to put the tail on later. Now it's time to ink up the eyes for my fox. I used the same eyes that I used on the raccoon, and I just inked up the eyes, not the nose, since I punched that nose out of the punch. And then I wanted a mouth on him, and there wasn't any mouths in the set, so I just took my Copic multi-liner and just drew one in. Next, I'm going to work on my sentiment. I'm using the labeler alphabet, and I'm just going to stamp my first word in the middle of this cardstock here because I'm going to die cut it later. And then what I like to do is with each line I start in the middle, so I take the middle letter or 2 letters and center it, and then I work outward. So the fox, I'm going to do the E and the F first, and then I'll work my way out from there. And then say, I thought it was just going to be S-A-Y. I forgot about the question mark, so I put the A in the middle. But anyway, that's how I get my sentiment centered when there's multiple lines. I have a piece of Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock and the rectangular die, so I'm going to die cut that out, and I'm going to use the negative. You can see there's stitching on the outside and the inside, which is why a lot of my dies are from Simon Says Stamp. The circle is the same way, so I'm going to arrange my sentiment so that it's coming out of the corner, and then I'll figure out where I want to die cut it. I'll hold it in place with my finger, carefully removing the fog, and then I'll take a piece of surgical tape and put it into place, and then I'll run that through my Big Shot. Then I have some excess on the top and the right that I'm going to be able to adhere it to the back of the frame. I wanted to add a little bit of grass under the fox, so I'm going to position him and then I'll put a pencil mark on his left and his right. And so I know I need to put the grass around that. I'm going to use some Zig watercolor pens, and you can see that this watercolor pen, it really functions as a regular marker, and it has a really nice fine brush tip like a paintbrush. It's not a solid nib that it's on there. It's kind of like a paintbrush. So I'm going to use the green, and then I'm going to go back in with the light green and fill in the gaps, and I kind of angle it out toward the side when I get toward the edge. Now that I have the grass behind him, I'm going to go ahead and adhere him, put a little bit behind his tail also. And then I didn't want it to look like he was on top of the grass, so I took my markers and I put a little bit more in front of him. And I did a lot of short grass right under him. There's like dots that I put underneath him, and that's because I want it to look like he's kind of sitting in it and mushing down a little bit. Now I'll adhere the sentiment, so I'm just going to put some of my glue on the back of the frame. And it's good using glue because then you can kind of move it around a little bit while it's still wet and get it positioned exactly where you want it. So I'm going to move this around until I get it just the way I want it, where it's equidistant from both sides as far as where the letters go. And then for the raccoon, I'm just going to figure out where he needs to go. I just want him popping in from the side. I'm not worried about him hanging off that left edge there. When that glue dries, I'll trim it out. So now I'll put the tail on as well. And so that's why I didn't want to adhere it to the raccoon, because I wanted to make sure I had it positioned in the frame correctly. And then I'm going to work on the card base. Now originally when I set this up, I just left it white, but then I decided I wanted a little bit of color in there. So I have some tumbled glass distress ink. And what I'm doing here is I'm priming my applicator on a piece of scratch paper. I like to do this because it gets kind of an even coat of ink on my applicator, and it really helps to avoid a lot of those rectangular blocks that you can get. When I apply this color, I'm going to use a very light hand. Like when I first get my applicator off of the ink pad and onto my cardstock, I'm barely going to touch my cardstock. And then as I apply the color, I can put more pressure on because the ink is coming off my applicator and onto the cardstock. So anyway, I just want a very light color, just enough to make my sentiment stand out. So now I can trim off my raccoon. You can see I stamped on the back there and messed up and had to flip it over. For the sentiment, I'm using the Paper Smooches He Said, She Said speech bubble, and this is Handwritten Notes by Avery L. Just a really nice font. So I'm going to stamp my bubble here, and then I'll stamp these 3 bubbles as if the fox is saying it from the front of the card, and then the I love you sentiment. And you can use anything in here. So what does the fox say? Anything you want him to say. So here's the Altenew set. I kind of regretted this. I didn't really like the way it turned out. I wanted to put some hearts, and I kind of wished I had put them outside the speech bubble after I was done, but anyway, I just went with it. So I put a bunch of Scotch foam tape on the back, especially around the frame, and then I made sure that each of the pieces of these animals had a Stampin' Up! Dimensional on it, just in case the glue wasn't enough to hold it in place. So I'm going to put this on my card base. And that is the card for today. So I really love this set a lot. I can't wait to make so many cards with it, and that fox is just so adorable. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.